In the stillness of a spring dawn in the year 1623, a piercing cry tore through the marble walls of Topkapi Palace. It was not the moan of a soldier wounded in battle, nor the desperate plea of a captured enemy. It was the scream of a young girl only 15 years old, Princess Fatma Sultan, daughter of the most powerful ruler on earth. Her cries cut through the corridors like icy blades. Even the eunuchs who guarded the palace doors recoiled in fear, too terrified to intervene in a moment forbidden to all. What happened that night was not a simple misfortune within the family. It was the unveiling of the hidden price every daughter of a sultan was forced to pay, a price carved into both flesh and soul. A truth history tried to silence for 6 centuries. Fatma's screams did not come from wounds of the body. They were the cries of a ritual, an ancient practice that shattered the spirit long before it touched the body. It condemned Ottoman princesses to a life of shadows even before they reached womanhood. For more than 600 years, the Ottoman Empire preserved a matrimonial preparation so sinister, so refined that not even the fiercest enemies of the throne would have wished it upon their own daughters. This system was carefully erased from the official chronicles, hidden behind gilded walls and ornate tapestries. It resurfaced only recently thanks to secret documents uncovered in Istanbul's archives in 2019. Across the world, millions of women, peasants, noble ladies, even queens, dreamed of the fate of an Ottoman princess, wrapped in silk, adorned with jewels, served by countless hands. But behind those glowing walls lived not luxury, but a nightmare so unbearable that many of these young girls prayed for death rather than face their marriage beds. And now in this telling, you like me will bear witness to a truth locked away for 6 centuries. Prepare yourself, for what you're about to hear is not a fairy tale, but a tale of horror disguised as impe, royal ceremony. Before we continue, I ask only one thing. If this story has already made your heart tremble, mark your interest with a gesture. Subscribe to the channel and in the comments tell us which queen or princess's fate you'd like revealed next. Would you choose Marie Antoinette, Cleopatra, Anne Boleyn? Your voice will guide us to the next secret history tried to bury. Now come with me. Let's uncover why so many Ottoman princesses, born into palaces of gold, longed for the cold embrace of the grave instead of the destiny of their wedding night. The Ottoman Empire, vast as a shoreless ocean, spread its dominion for more than 6 centuries. From 1299 to 1922, its armies thundered across 3 continents, their power echoing from the walls of Vienna to the burning deserts of Yemen. After the fall of Constantinople, in 1453, the city became the beating heart of Ottoman might. Renamed Istanbul, it housed Topkapi Palace, the most dazzling jewel of imperial power. Within those walls, golden chambers and perfumed courtyards shaped the fates not only of kingdoms but of souls. Hidden behind veils and endless corridors, the imperial harem formed a world of its own. At the height of its splendor, it held more than 800 women. It was a universe wrapped in silk and silence, where every breath was observed and every gesture could mean either rise or ruin. In 1530, when Suleiman the Magnificent granted the title of Haseki Sultan to his wife Hurrem, the harem ceased to be only a place of pleasure. It became an arena of intrigue, alliances, and silent wars among women. Concubines, mostly Istian slaves captured in Europe or bought from North African markets, entered the harem with dreams of rising. Their days were filled with music, embroidery, poetry, and rituals of obedience. They hoped to win the Sultan's eye, to exchange their chains for power. Ironically, these young women, torn from their homes and sold like wares, often had more freedom than the Sultan's own daughters. Between 1533 and 1656, the era historians call the Sultanate of Women, female influence reached its peak. Women like Kosam Sultan and Turhan Hatice Sultan ruled from behind the veil, guiding councils, deciding wars, and shaping the empire's destiny with a firm hand. Yet, while concubines rose as hidden empresses, the true princesses, those of royal blood, were trapped in a darker labyrinth. They were pawns in the empire's political chess game. Human coins used to seal treaties, pacify rebellions, or secure the loyalty of powerful pashas. It was in this world that Princess Fatma Sultan was born in 1606, daughter of Sultan Ahmed the first formidable Kosam Sultan, the woman who would one day rule the empire from the shadows. Fatma's childhood was gilded with beauty and learning. She wandered perfumed Ardennes, studied astronomy, read Arabic and Persian manuscripts. Scholars praised her intelligence. Chroniclers admired her beauty. She was a child prodigy, mastering 4 languages, penning calligraphy as elegantly as a poet, and hungering to unravel the mysteries of the stars. She debated scholars in history, law, and geography. Her brilliance lit up the palace, but none of it mattered. Her fate, had been sealed before her first breath. From the moment she was born, her life was not her own, her destiny to be given in marriage as a token of loyalty no matter her will. The man chosen for her was Damatara Mustafa Pasha, a hardened commander, 20 years her senior, who had proven his loyalty to the throne in battles against Persia. For him, the union was a ladder to greater power. For her, it was the beginning of tragedy. 3 months before her wedding, Fatma was thrust into the feared process known as Turval and Mubarak, the so-called sacred education. This ritual existed only for princesses. It was the polished result of centuries of psychological control designed to crush royal pride and mold them into instruments of obedience. The one who oversaw Fatma's preparation was Gulnarhat, a woman of 60 winters, head of the harem and veteran of more than a dozen princess trainings. Under her watchful eye, Fatma was led into the Angelino Dais, the bride's chamber. This room, adorned with Persian carpets and ebony panels, was not a sanctuary, but a prison. Every detail whispered of duty and submission. From dawn to noon she was forced into endless rituals of reverence. She had to master 18 different forms of bowing, postures for greeting, for serving, for lying down, for waiting silently for her husband's arrival. Even her walk was no longer her own. She was trained in Yurish and Sesh, measured steps with her head tilted exactly 30 degrees, her hands never raised above her heart. Every movement stripped away her dignity as a princess, remaking her into a docile shadow. But the crew, lest torment was her speech. Her vocabulary was reduced to just 43 approved words, expressions of gratitude, acceptance, humble requests, or apologies. Any deviation, any spark of independent thought, was punished with fasting, solitary confinement, or public humiliation before the harem. Her obedience was tested by a tribunal of women and eunuchs, presided over by none other than her mother, Kusum, Eve. She judged her daughter not as a child, but as a coin in the empire's market of power. And still the most disturbing part of her preparation awaited beneath the palace in underground chambers. Replicas of bridal rooms had been built. There Fatma faced Talim and Gerdek, the rehearsals of the first night. She was forced to interact with wax mannequins, anatomical figures crafted by Venetian artisa. Instructors, stern and cold, commanded her to perform gestures and acts no girl of her age should know. Every reaction, her tears, her resistance, her fear was written down in secret records. The more she resisted, the harsher her conditioning became. Slowly, the girl who had once dreamed of the stars was broken into silence. Her brilliance dimmed, her body was trained to obey, her spirit bent into submission. Princess Fatma was no longer a daughter of emperors. She was an apprentice to her fate, A week before the wedding, the regime grew even harsher. Fatma Sultan was transferred to the Galen Koshku, the bride's pavilion, an isolated chamber where no sound from outside could penetrate. Here, every aspect of her existence was controlled. What she ate was prescribed: pomegranates, honey, almonds, goat's milk, spices from Yemen. Even the way she bathed was regulated. Each day, attendants performed purification baths with oils scented with valerian, poppy, and orange blossom. These elixirs, prepared by alchemists trained in Cordoba and Samarkand, contained secret substances. Some calmed the body, others dulled the will, and a few induced a strange sense of drifting away from the self. The walls of the pavilion were draped with tapestries embroidered with scenes of ideal wives, obedient, fertile, submissive, promised eternal rewards for their loyalty. And if that wasn't enough, Venetian mirrors were strategically placed so that Fatma was forced to observe herself constantly. This practice, called muraqaba, was once a Sufi exercise of mystical self-reflection. But here it became a psychological weapon. She was made to police herself, to watch even her most private thoughts. In this prison of silken mirrors, Fatma began to realize the full truth. She no longer belonged to herself. Her body, her voice, her very mind had been molded into an instrument of obedience. The preparation had achieved its purpose, not only breaking her, but erasing the girl who once dreamed of the stay. The appointed day arrived, March 15, 1623. From sunrise, Istanbul throbbed like an overflowing heart, the streets filled with processions, music, and incense. Inside Topkapi Palace, banquets were laid on golden plates. Dancers from Persia and Andalusia performed. Musicians sang the empire's glory. Janissaries displayed their strength before the Sultan's eyes. For the people, it was a vision of paradise. For Princess Fatma, it was the prelude to a sentence. Chroniclers wrote that while the guests laughed and feasted, Fatma sat in silence, her lips dry, her gaze empty. The palace doctors noted what we would today call panic attacks, trembling cold sweats despite the cool March air, complete loss of appetite, shallow breathing so severe they feared for her life. The public spectacle glowed with splendor, but inside her terror grew like a spreading shadow. When the final cup was raised and the civilians departed, the most dreaded procession began. Fatma was escorted to the nuptial pavilion, a special building in the private gardens designed from plans dating back to Mehmed the Conqueror. Octagonal in shape, it rose in 3 levels. Each level had a purpose: purification, submissi, and consummation. The architecture was no accident. Every corridor, every chamber was meant to reinforce her vulnerability, to turn the ceremony into a total act of surrender. The first level, Taja, was devoted to purification. Here, Fatma underwent hours of ritual baths, marble tubs filled with rose water, essences of sandalwood, amber grease from Somalia. Alchemists applied ointments mixed diluted opium, mandrake extract, and secret compounds that induced calm, compliance, even ecstasy. The doctors described her state as one of missionary trance, the body yielding while the soul screamed in silence. The second level, Teslim Katu, was the floor of surrender. Fatma was dressed in her bridal attire, white silk embroidered with gold, pearls from the Persian Gulf sewn into the fabric. At first glance, it was a gown of majesty, but it was also a cage. Hidden cords and clasps made it easier to restrain her. The crown weighed heavily, forcing her posture. Anklets and bracelets restricted her movement. Shoes with thick soles slowed her steps. The dress was a prison sewn in luxury, while Fatma was transformed into a living symbol of obedience. Her future husband, Ka Mustafa Pasha, paired in a very different way. Surrounded by counselors and seasoned warriors, He was taught how to impose himself psychologically on a princess of imperial blood. Methods of intimidation, phrases designed to humiliate, techniques of physical dominance. Every detail was planned to ensure there would be no space for doubt, no room for resistance. Finally, Fatma was led to the third level, Chif Katu, the chamber of consummation. Its walls were covered with tapestries depicting military triumphs, conquered cities, defeated armies, captive princesses. This imagery was deliberate. It drew a direct line between victory on the battlefield and victory in the marriage bed. The furniture itself was built for control. Beds with hidden cords, cushions soaked in calming oils, lighting designed to soften. Resistance. It was here in this chamber, drenched in symbols of domination, that Fatma faced her most dreaded night. When the doors of the safe Katu closed behind the procession, Fatma was left alone with her husband. Medical records from the time describe what happened next as a total collapse of the spirit. The girl, who had endured months of discipline and humiliation, could no longer respond coherently. Her body trembled uncontrollably. Her voice dwindled to a faint murmur. Her eyes wandered as if gazing into a world far away. The imperial doctors called this state sakma, the complete shock. Ka Mustafa Pasha, seasoned in war and conquest, believed at first that this was arrogance, a defiance that needed breaking. He applied the techniques taught to him, words of intimidation, gestures of dominance, calculated physical contact. But what he found was not resistance. It was absence. There was no struggle to overcome, only a void. Fatma's mind had fled into deep dissociation, as though her soul had left her body in order to survive. When the consummation finally occurred after hours of failed attempts, it was recorded by hidden observers as traumatic for both. Persian-coded documents describe internal bleeding, repeated fainting, and what physicians called ruh sukmek, the departure of the soul. From that night onward, Fatma was never the same. In the days that followed, her behavior alarmed even the harshest instructors of the harem. She developed selective mutism, speaking only in whispers and only when addressed directly. Her appetite vanished completely, forcing attendance to feed her by hand. She would break into hours of uncontrollable weeping without reason. Worst of all, she developed what chroniclers called the sickness of fear. The mere presence of a man, even trusted eunuchs, threw her into panic. Rapid breathing, sweating, fainting. Palace physicians diagnosed what they termed virginal melancholy, a condition they considered common among princesses after their wedding night. In modern words, it was irreversible trauma, an unhealable wound carved into her soul. They tried remedies, herbs, music, Sufi spiritual exercises. None restored her vitality. The brilliant girl who once debated scholars, the curious mind who adored astronomy and poetry, was gone forever. In her place remained a dim shadow, obedient, vacant, lifeless. Her books gathered dust, her instruments lay untouched. The gardens where she once walked with joy grew silent. The daughter of the most powerful sultan had become a ghost of what she might have been. Her marriage with Ka Mustafa Pasha became a mechanical arrangement. There were children, public ceremonies, appearances of normality. But behind closed doors, there was only silence and distance. Mustafa himself, later memoirs saga, sought refuge in endless campaigns and in opium, trying to drown the guilt of being the instrument of a ritual that destroyed her. Fatma lived 29 more years in this hollow state. She became a figure of ceremony, a mother by duty, a wife without a voice. In 1652, she died at the age of 46. Official records list her cause as a brain fever, but the date of her death fell on the anniversary of her wedding. To many in the court, it was no coincidence. That day, the weight of memory closed finally upon her soul. The tragedy of Fatma Sultan was not an isolated case. It was a mirror of a pattern repeated through generations of Ottoman princesses. Palace records unearthed centuries later revealed that dozens of royal daughters endured the same fate. Some were left marked by mutism, others tried to escape through madness or through death, and a few simply vanished from the chronicles as if they had never existed at all. The machinery of empire, so precise in its protocols, knew how to erase inconvenient traces. What the empire could not completely expunge, it cloaked in the velvet language of courtly euphemism. The brutal reality was softened by words of ceremony, hidden behind the ornate calligraphy of official records. Yet, the truth has a way of bleeding through the paper. It survived in the margins, in secret writings, in coded letters and whispered testimonies that lingered in the shadows until the modern age finally brought them to light. Remarkably, despite years of psychological conditioning, some of these princesses dared to resist. Newly translated records speak of royal daughters who staged their own deaths to escape the horror of a second arranged marriage. Others devised secret ciphers to send warnings to sisters silenced by the same rituals. And a rare few, possessing a courage that defies imagination, petitioned the Sultan directly for divorce, striking a blow against a system designed to be unbreakable. These fragments, buried for centuries in forbidden archives, remind us that even in the absolute deepest darkness, the human spirit can ignite a spark of resistance. Women raised to surrender still found the breath to whisper no into the silence. The tragedy of Fatma Sultan exposes a chilling paradox. We often ask, absolute power protects those who wield it, but in truth, it often devours its own flesh and blood. While the world looked upon Ottoman princesses as radiant idols living in paradise, their reality was a prison of invisible chains. It was a machine of statecraft so ruthlessly efficient that it fed human lives into its gears to ensure political stability. In the popular imagination, the harem is a fantasy of silk, perfume, and romance. But we now know it was also a theater of imposed silence and smothered tears. The fairy tales we were told were merely political constructions, narratives that consumed the Sultan's own daughters to keep the empire standing. And this brings us to an inevitable haunting question. If this was the fate of the Ottoman daughters, how many other secrets lie waiting in the dusty archives of ancient palaces? What macabre rituals were buried in the frozen courts of Russia, the forbidden cities of China, or the stone keeps of Europe? What terrible price did women pay across the globe to uphold the weight of a dynasty? Fatma Sultan's story is more than a chapter of Ottoman history. It is a warning. It reminds us that the splendor of crowns often rests upon a foundation of suffering. For centuries, official historians served the throne, painting over the cracks with gold leaf. They chronicled the jewels and the music, but they erased the fear and the broken spirits. But here at Curious Historians, we look beneath the surface. We read the forgotten manuscripts and the medical notes where the true pulse of history beats. We see the lives rewritten and the tragedies masquerading as triumphs. The scream that tore through Topkapi Palace in 1623 was not an anomaly, it was an echo. And it is only now that we are finally listening. To understand Fatma is to strip away the mask of the past. It forces us to see that behind the glittering facade, lives were consumed by duty. It proves that power is rarely as golden as it appears, and it compels us to ask, how many other voices are still buried under the weight of ceremony, waiting for us to find them? If the story of Fatma Sultan has left a mark on your soul, if it has made you question the history books, then you are in the right place. Join us. Subscribe to Curious Historians now, because our work is far from over. Share this story with those who need to know what lies behind the fairy tale. And now, we turn to you. Whose fate should we uncover next? Shall we expose the dark secrets of a Russian Tsarina feared even by her own mother? Shall we enter the forbidden Sit? Why, to reveal the rituals binding a Chinese empress? Or perhaps we should look to a European princess, traded like currency to seal a fragile alliance? Tell us in the comments. Your curiosity will guide our next journey into the dark, because only by bringing these truths into the light can we finally give a voice to those sacrificed in the name of power.